Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Glen Kuiper Show here on my YouTube channel. Hope everybody is doing well. There's no baseball games anymore. The season has come to an end. Last time we talked, it was after Game 7 of the World Series, and what a World Series it was. A little bit later on in the show, we'll talk about that one last time, the fabulous Game 7, and we'll talk about what it means that the Dodgers won the World Series again, but that's for a little bit later on in the show. So thanks for joining me tonight. I'm going to some Giants notes. Is Jeff Kent Hall of Famer? We're going to talk about that. Kind of a fun subject. Anytime you deal with the Hall of Fame, who should be in, who shouldn't be in, people love to talk about that and give your opinions. And I want that. You know the drill. Feel free to jump into the comments section and tell me what you think. I will read them as best I can. You know how I operate here on the Glen Kuiper Show. Also, hit the subscribe button. The subscribers have been doing great. Now we're closing in on 9,000 subscribers, thanks to you guys. So, again, a couple notes. As always, follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Kuiper Baseball. Instagram, at Glen Kuiper. Email glenkuiperbaseball@gmail.com if you have any questions that way. But all right, let's get started. And we're going to do that with just some simple Giants notes. There's an interesting thing that came out today that I think everybody's going to like. Reports are that the Giants are finalizing a deal for Bruce Bochy to return to the organization as an advisor. It's not official yet, but it sounds like they're working towards some type of agreement. Again, Bruce Bochy, an advisor with the Giants, is what it sounds like. Remember, Dusty Baker is also an advisor for the Giants. So you think about that, and think about that with the new manager, Tony Vitello, in mind. Dusty Baker, 26 years as a major league manager, 10 with the San Francisco Giants. Bruce Bochy, 28 years as a major league manager, 12 of those in San Francisco. So you combine Dusty Baker and Bruce Bochy and their resumes, 54 years of big league managerial experience, 22 of those seasons as the Giants manager. Think about that. Think about what these guys know. This will be a huge asset and resource for Tony Vitello, the new manager. How can it not be, right? You got two managers, two former managers. You just heard the numbers, how long they've been doing it. Now they're both Giants advisors. There's nothing that Dusty and Boch haven't seen in the dugout, in the clubhouse. There just isn't. And Tony Vitello should have these two guys on speed dial. How could you not want to have them on speed dial? How could you not listen to what Boch says and what Dusty says? And I think the Giants, and I think Buster wanted to bring Bochy back in some capacity. And it just so happens then you make the managerial hire of a brand new guy who's never done this before. It just makes even more sense. So listen, you hire a guy that's never been a major league manager. You need to give him everything he needs to succeed. And the Giants are certainly trying to do that, still putting together their coaching staff. But just think about being able to sit down and talk. If you're Vitello, being able to sit down and talk with Dusty Baker, sit down and talk with Bruce Bochy, have questions, pick their brain about maybe things you're not sure about. I think that's huge. You're talking about two former managers that will both be in baseball's Hall of Fame soon. So that is a huge asset for the new manager for the Giants, and I don't think there's any question he will take advantage of that. But two, I think having Bruce Bochy back in the organization is a big deal for Buster. Buster's still learning his craft, and I'm sure he will lean on Bruce Bochy and Dusty Baker as well for different things, many different things. So anyways, that's the Giants news that came out today. It's not official with Bochy, but it looks like that is indeed going to happen. Bruce Bochy will return to the Giants as an advisor, the same title that Dusty Baker has. So it'll be great to see Boch back. And again, those guys, the advisor roles, They're not at the ballpark every game. Dusty's there a fair amount. Boch will be there a fair amount. I don't know that they're going to be, at every single game or on the road at all, but they will be available, and it doesn't necessarily mean face-to-face. Listen, you call those guys and get advice from those two anytime, and that would be a pretty cool thing. So anyways, that's kind of the Giants, some of the Giants notes coming out to today. A couple days ago, we find out the Giants had 2 Gold Glovers this year, Patrick Bailey and Logan Webb. Congratulations to those 2 guys. Bailey's done this before. This is his second straight Gold Glove, so that's a big deal. And Logan Webb, his first career Gold Glove. In fact, he's the first Giants pitcher to win a Gold Glove since Big Daddy Rick Russell did it way back in 1987. So Logan Webb gets the Gold Glove. And let's give this guy a bunch of credit. And I know I talk a lot about Logan Webb. I'm a big fan just because of how he goes about his business. But this is a guy who throughout his career had trouble holding runners on base. It became a major issue. Base stealers were taking advantage of Logan Webb. And he said, that's it. That's it. I'm done. I need to get better at this. And he worked in spring training, and he worked, and he worked. And all of a sudden, guys weren't stealing bases off him anymore because he figured out ways to improve on holding runners. Doesn't seem like a big thing, but it really is. He worked at it in spring training, and he got good at it. There's an art to holding runners, and he figured it out. Give the guy credit. Remember, this is the same guy, Logan Webb, who wanted to develop a strikeout pitch, felt like there were opportunities where he needed a strikeout. That in years past, maybe he didn't have a pitch to go do it. So he worked on that. What ends up happening? He leads the National League in strikeouts this year. That's one of the things I love about Logan Webb. He's not afraid to continually try to improve his game, and this is a guy who's pretty darn good to start with. So big congratulations to Webb and Bailey. Last year it was Matt Chapman and Bailey who were the Gold Glove winners for the Giants, but this year it's Bailey and Logan Webb. And just a little Gold Glove history. The most Gold Gloves in a season for the San Francisco Giants, it was back in 1993. Remember that great team that the Giants had in 93? They had 4 Gold Glovers. Who were they? Can you think? Can you remember? A couple of them are pretty easy. It was Barry Bonds. It was Matt Williams. It was Robbie Thompson. Who was the 4th? Catcher Kurt Manwaring. Remember Kurt Manwaring? Very good defensive catcher. So that was back in 1993. That's the most Gold Gloves the Giants have ever had in 1 year. So a little, as we like to do, a little history lesson as well. So there's some Giants goodies, which we will always give you on the Glen Kuiper Show. But before we continue, let's check in with our sponsors, as we like to do. As the Glen Kuiper Show is brought to you by Tilden Properties. As an investor, one of the best places to put your money is California's multi-family real estate. That is where Tilden Properties comes in. You'll see quarterly dividends and equity buildup in the real estate market if you join the team of Tilden Properties. Call them today at 925-209-8558 or go to their website and look at their portfolio. Very impressive, tildenproperties.com. We're also brought to you by the Carrick Real Estate Team. They have been helping families buy and sell homes across the Bay Area with a legacy of client-first service dating all the way back to 1978. Whether you're moving up, downsizing, or you're just ready to make that first purchase of a house, trust the Carrick Real Estate Team to guide you home. Give them a call at 925-548-4132. We are also brought to you by Valone Insurance. Are you tired of being overcharged for your property insurance? Valone Insurance has multiple options for your home and landlord properties. Save big money on your property insurance. Call Kyle or Ron at Valone Insurance, 925-433-8271. So thanks to the sponsors, as always, as we move on to our next segment on the Glen Kuiper Show. And this is a fun one because it's one of those things that it's one of those great baseball questions when you start digging into the Hall of Fame. And is a guy Hall of Fame worthy? Because everybody has their opinions on this. And the reason I'm bringing it up tonight is because the contemporary baseball era player ballot came out yesterday. And this is what the Hall of Fame does. They have different eras now, different ways for players who did not make it in their 10 years of being on the ballot. So they put together these different baseball eras and committees, and they vote on these guys again. And we saw last year Dick Allen got in. We'll talk about Dick Allen in a minute. So that's the deal. So I believe there's three different committees with three different eras. Okay, if that makes any sense. If I'm confusing you, I apologize. But the contemporary baseball era, it's described as players whose greatest contributions to the game came since 1980. So basically, guys who have been in the big leagues from 1980 on, and obviously retire now. So does that make any sense? So that is this year's ballot. Okay, there's 8 players on this ballot. Okay, it's Roger Clemens, Fernando Valenzuela, Carlos Delgado, Dale Murphy, Gary Sheffield, Don Mattingly, Barry Bonds, and Jeff Kent. How about that? Is that interesting? So what needs to happen is the committee consists of 16 members, okay? You need 12 votes or 75%. 12 out of 16 need to say, yes, you're in. And if you get the 75%, you're a Hall of Famer. Okay. So that's what got me thinking about. Now, listen, we know the other names on the list. We know with Clemens and Bonds, we know the reasons why. It's not statistical. Okay. People don't want to put them in for, whatever. That's their own deal. So I wanted to concentrate on Kent because I've always felt like he was a little bit overlooked. I don't believe he ever got 50% when he was on the main Hall of Fame ballot. But I always thought he deserved a little more love when it came to potentially being a Hall of Famer. So what I did, and I want to get some thoughts, from the viewers after I throw out some numbers, and you guys know how I roll. I do throw out kind of the basic numbers. I don't usually get too deep into analytics because I don't want to get confusing and that type of stuff. But Jeff Kent, okay, 17 years as a big leaguer. All right. He finished his career with 2,461 hits. He finished his career with 377 home runs. That's the most home runs by a second baseman in Major League Baseball history. Okay. 377. He finished with 1,518 RBIs. He finished with 560 doubles. And he was the MVP in the National League in 2000. So those are just listen, there's many more numbers we could throw out there, but I'm just trying to keep it somewhat basic with hits, home runs, RBIs, doubles. It doesn't mean that those are the end all numbers that you should base everything on. It's just the ones we're going to use to keep it fairly simple. Okay. And remember, Jeff Kent played second base, played in the middle of the diamond, which is a thing. It's a big deal. Was Jeff Kent a Gold Glove second baseman? No, he was not. He had very average range. But I think, and I watched Jeff Kent a lot when he was with the Giants, I thought he was actually a pretty good defensive second baseman. He just didn't have a lot of range. Okay. So, no, he was not a Gold Glover. But I don't know that he was necessarily a negative defensive player. I thought he was average to maybe slightly above average, playing in the middle of the diamond. And that, I think you need to take that into consideration. And playing second base for a long, long time, then played some first at the end. So, in my humble opinion, slightly better than average defensively, and you hear the numbers, right? And again, those are basic numbers. So what I thought I would do is just take a look at some other guys that are in the Hall of Fame and compare the numbers. And I'm not saying these guys that I'm going to throw out there, they're all guys that you know. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be in, because I think it's fair that all of them are in. Okay. But that's not what we're doing. We're just using these guys that are in the Hall of Fame, their numbers, as comparison to Jeff Kent, who's not in, and quite frankly has never got really close to being in. He may have a shot here with the contemporary baseball era committee. Okay. And just so you know, that committee that we're talking about, before we get to the numbers, the committee that we're talking about consists of 16 people, right? Some are Hall of Famers, some are executives, baseball executives, and some are veteran media members. So that's the group. Hall of Famers, big league executives, and members of the media. That's what the committee consists of, and those are the guys who vote on this. So, anyways, I wanted to start with Dick Allen. Dick Allen was a terrific power hitter in the 60s and 70s. Big, strong first baseman, awesome to watch. Started with Philadelphia. I remember watching him with the Chicago White Sox, where he won his one MVP award. But Dick Allen last year got into the Hall, and Dick Allen, unfortunately, is no longer with us. He passed away a little while back. But last year, he got in on the classic era committee membership vote. Okay, so that's a different way to get in. That committee is based on your greatest accomplishments as a player before 1980. Okay, try not to confuse you here. That's the classic era committee. Players before 1980. The contemporary era committee, they're voting on players after 1980. Dick Allen got into the Hall of Fame thanks to those voters last year from the classic era committee. Okay. Dick Allen finished with 1,848 hits, 351 homers, 1,119 RBIs, and 320 doubles. Okay. So I just want to compare those numbers to Jeff Kent, because Dick Allen is in, and he got voted in by a different era committee. Okay. So Jeff Kent has 613 more hits than Dick Allen. Jeff Kent has 26 more home runs than Dick Allen. Jeff Kent has 399 more RBIs than Dick Allen. And Jeff Kent has 240 more doubles than Dick Allen. Dick Allen won one MVP. So did Jeff Kent. So the basic numbers would tell you that Dick Allen is in the Hall of Fame, deserves to be in, but where doesn't Jeff Kent match up with Dick? Dick Allen was a first baseman. So think about that. Think about, Kent's offensive numbers, the basic numbers there's more numbers there. But again, that doesn't mean Dick Allen doesn't deserve to be in, because he does, and I'm glad he's in. Jeff Bagwell, awesome player, right? MVP winner with the Houston Astros not that long ago. We all remember watching Jeff Bagwell, right? So let's compare Bagwell, who made it with the Hall of Fame voters, no questions asked, he was in. So let's look at Bagwell's numbers compared to Jeff Kent. Bagwell had 2,314 hits. So Jeff Kent had 147 more hits than Jeff Bagwell. Bagwell had 72 more home runs than Jeff Kent. Bagwell had 449 homers. RBIs were close. Bagwell had 11 more RBIs than Kent in his career. And Jeff Kent had 72 more doubles than Jeff Bagwell in his career. So the numbers are fairly close. 72 more home runs for Bagwell, but Bagwell made it. He didn't need any different era committee to get into the Hall of Fame. He got in right away. So those numbers are not a lot different. And Bagwell was a first baseman. He was a good first baseman. So again, is there that much difference between the kind of offensive player that Bagwell was and Kent was? The numbers say not a lot. Okay. Let's do a guy that Giants fans adored. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. Orlando Cepeda, right? Remember Orlando, long time with the Giants, got traded to the Cardinals. So let's look at Orlando Cepeda's numbers, okay? Orlando had 2,351 hits, 379 homers, 1,365 RBIs, and 417 doubles, okay? So compare those to Kent. Jeff Kent had 110 more hits in his career than Cepeda. Cepeda had 2 more home runs than Kent, so pretty close there. Jeff Kent had 153 more RBIs than Orlando Cepeda, and he had 143 more doubles than Orlando Cepeda. And again, Orlando played first base, was okay defensively. So again, the Kent numbers stand up to another Hall of Famer in Orlando Cepeda. And the last guy that I chose, and it was a little bit random, but I wanted guys that people would recognize and just, kind of curiously say, well, how close are his numbers? So I looked at Edgar Martinez. Remember Edgar Martinez, terrific. Started out as a third baseman, but most of his career he was a DH for the Mariners. A Hall of Famer, great hitter, career 312 batting average, won a couple of batting titles. He could really, really hit, but he was a DH. Let's keep that in mind. So I looked at Edgar Martinez numbers, the batting average higher than Jeff Kent because Edgar, he was a high batting average guy and a big run producer. So, let's look at these numbers again just to see where Kent sits with somebody like Edgar Martinez, who most everybody in Major League Baseball said, yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. Okay. Jeff Kent had 214 more hits than Edgar Martinez. Jeff Kent had 68 more home runs than Edgar Martinez. Jeff Kent had 257 more RBIs than Edgar Martinez. And Jeff Kent had 46 more doubles than Edgar Martinez. So again, the Kent numbers stack up. And again, Kent was a middle of the diamond player, a guy like Edgar Martinez, who was a terrific hitter. One of the great hitters, one of the great clutch hitters. He was a designated hitter. So this, again, all those guys deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But my point of all this, and I'm repeating it because I want people to understand why I'm doing this, is I think Jeff Kent deserves more love when it comes to the Hall of Fame voting. And now it's entered into, the different era committees where it's different voting. It's just 16 people voting and you need 12 votes. So to me, listen, we could dig on numbers and pick different guys and all that, but my point was the numbers are there, and many of them are better than guys that are in the Hall of Fame now. And listen, most home runs ever by a second baseman, that stands out to me a little bit. So what do you guys think about that? Are my numbers shallow? Could I dig deeper into this? Absolutely. But, just for discussion's sake, what do you guys think? I think there's a point to be made there. And maybe Kent gets in. Maybe he gets voted in. But, there's other people on that list that, to me, listen, Carlos Delgado, 473 home runs and 1,512 RBIs. He's on this list, but he didn't get in initially. Okay. How about this guy? Gary Sheffield. Listen to these numbers. He had 2,689 hits, 509 home runs, 1,676 RBIs for Gary Sheffield. And we all saw him play. And was there a more scary hitter than Gary Sheffield when he stepped in the box? Shouldn't he get more love from the Hall of Fame? Those are big numbers. I know he played with a lot of different teams, but I don't care about that. I mean, it's just weird to me. Some guys get maybe more love with the Hall of Fame than they should, and some guys just don't get much of any when I don't know. It's a little hard to figure out the voting sometimes, but those guys are on the list of the contemporary baseball era Hall of Fame voting, which we'll find out. We'll find out in December if anybody gets in. So I want to go to the comments because I do want to. I just want to see what you guys think. Am I crazy? Am I off base here? Let's show some of the comments because they're good. So the good people from the New York Giants Preservation Society watching way out on the East Coast. What an injustice. Kent, most homers for a second baseman in 8 of 9 straight seasons of 100 RBIs, all 6 years with the Giants. Disservice not having Will the Thrill on that ballot as well. So, a lot of people think Will could be close. But, in this conversation, it's about Kent. And, I do think I think there's something there. Bake That Dough says perhaps Kent's washing his truck story is working against him. Yeah, he was not washing his truck. He was riding a motorcycle, and somebody was filming him doing wheelies on Hayden Avenue or Hayden Road in Scottsdale, Arizona. If you've been to spring training, you know Hayden. It's much, much busier now than it was, back in whenever Jeff Kent was doing it, 2000, 2001. But he was a motorcycle guy, and he wanted to pop some wheelies on Hayden Road after practice. I know the guy who was shooting the video, but I'm not going to reveal his name because I would never do that. But there is a video out there somewhere. But Jeff Kent said he fell after washing his truck. Turned out to be quite a thing for a little while. And then Kent ended up getting back and getting healthy. But that was interesting. Bake That Dough says, in all seriousness, perhaps Kent's reputation as a difficult teammate and rocky relationship with the press is working against him. I hope that's not the case. Bake That Dough. The people in the press that I know, and I know a lot of them, and the ones that vote, they take it serious. I know, they're human beings, and you would hope that they don't let any of that come into their decision process. There may be some that do. The ones I know absolutely do not. The good ones here in the Bay Area, terrific sports writers here in the Bay Area. No, their integrity is top notch. They're not letting that get in the way. There could be some that do. And that's always been a little bit hard to believe, but Kent, he just wasn't he wasn't a warm, friendly guy. He wasn't a bad guy. I mean, if you got him at the right time, he was actually, he was fun to talk to. He was very, a sharp guy. He just, he was one of those guys. He just struck me as he just didn't want to be bothered. I don't want to talk to people. But man, could he hit, so I hope that reputation doesn't play a part in any of this because, just because somebody may not be a super friendly guy, that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. You know what I mean? So I hope that's not the case. Sometimes maybe it is. I don't know. Make sure you keep your comments coming, get the questions in because, I thought this would be a fun thing to talk about. Retired number 21, Jeff Kent, of course, looked good in that number 21. But you know what? Here's a good one. And I didn't get this guy, but Chris at 898 says Frank White. Yeah, I mean, Frank White was a terrific. Frank White was a terrific defensive second baseman, and he won multiple Gold Gloves. I'm just looking him up now. That's why I don't mean to turn away because I'll be curious to see. And again, Frank White got, a lot of his attention because of his defense, and he played on certainly some terrific teams. He was an 8-time Gold Glove winner. Was Frank White. Let's look at his career number just for fun. Frank White, he had 2,006 hits, 160 homers, but he was not a home run guy. That wasn't his thing. Career batting average of 255, 407 doubles, 178 stolen bases. So, I mean, he was an okay offensive player, but he was a terrific defensive player, Frank White. So again, there's different names we could throw out there, but I thought it'd be fun to see what you guys think about Jeff Kent. And you know what? I hope he gets the vote. I do. I always really liked him as a player. I thought he was a little bit underrated, maybe overshadowed by Bonds, which I don't know that he really cared about that. But man, he could hit. He could really hit, and he had a terrific long career. So yeah, appreciate the comments about my Jeff Kent segment. All right, we're going to shift gears now, and we're going to go to some Game 7 history. All right, people are still talking about what happened Saturday night. How can you not? Whether we hated that the Dodgers won or not is really sort of past us now, I think. And they did. They did what they've done all year. They came back, and it is what it is. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go back a little bit, and I like to go back, but not super far, right? So I went back to the year 2000. So that's 26 years, 26 seasons. How many Game 7 World Series have there been since 2000? Okay, so I looked it up. So there's been 8 of them: 2001, 2002, 11, 14, 16, 17, 19, and the one we just witnessed. So we have seen since the year 2000, we have seen 8 Game 7 World Series. Okay. World Series Game 7s, I should say. So my question is, let's run through them real quick and see what do we think is the best one. And it's going to be really hard to beat what we saw, obviously, on Saturday night. But it started in 2001. Okay. You remember that one? That's the Diamondbacks over the Yankees. So you get a walk-off, game-winning World Series Game 7 hit by Luis Gonzalez. So the Diamondbacks win that one 3-2. But think about that. A game-winning hit in the World Series. That happens very, very seldom. And again, that was a while ago, but you still have memories of it. And you know who started that game? Curt Schilling and Roger Clemens were those 2 starting pitchers in that Game 7. So, I mean, listen, I remember watching that game. So, where does that stand? Okay. 2002, we all know, right? Actually, that was a boring Game 7. If you remember, the Angels beat the Giants 4-1. Giants scored early, up 1-0, and then who's the Garrett Anderson bases clearing double. Livan Hernandez didn't have anything that night, and the one big hit, and that was it. The final score was 4-1. Remember, the Giants got the tying run to the plate in the bottom of the 9th inning, but Lofton flied out. So, what happened the night before was, full of excitement and disappointment for the Giants Game 6. But that Game 7, quite frankly, just from a viewer standpoint, was fairly uneventful. As the Angels won the game again 4-1 over the Giants. So didn't have anything till 2011. Okay. And the Cardinals beat the Rangers in Game 7 by a final score of 6-2. Again, somewhat eventful. And much like 2002, it was Game 6 where, everything happened. And that's, you remember that one? It was like, oh my gosh, St. Louis. What did they do? They scored 2 in the 9th to tie, 2 in the 10th to tie, and then they won it in the 11th. And I believe the Rangers were 1 out away from winning the World Series twice. Maybe even 1 strike away from winning the World Series twice. And the Cardinals kept coming back. And then that was Game 6. And then again, 6-2 final in Game 7. So sort of uneventful. And what everybody remembers is Game 6. Then you got to go to 2014. Giants fans all remember this one. Tight final score, 3-2 Giants over Kansas City. Remember, the Giants went up 3-2 in the top of the fourth inning, and that was it. And that, of course, is when Bumgarner came out and pitched the final 5 innings. And there wasn't a lot going on in that game offensively, but if you think about how it ended with, Alex Gordon going to third, I mean, there was certainly some excitement. And anytime you have a 3-2 game from the fourth inning through the end of the game, there had to be a whole bunch of tense moments. So that's a pretty good one, right? I don't know if it matches 2001, but keep that in mind. And I know the Giants won, so that makes it great and all that. But just from sheer viewing, that's what I want you guys to decide. 2016, we had another World Series Game 7. That was when the Cubs beat Cleveland 8-7 in Cleveland in 10 innings. So we had an extra inning Game 7. But remember, Rajai Davis hits the home run at the bottom of the 8th inning to tie it. And it was like Cleveland's going to finally win it. Haven't won one in, 75 years. They just shocked the Cubs, but the Cubs came right back, scored a couple runs in the 10th. The final score again, 8-7. That was a pretty darn good World Series Game 7 in 2016 because you had that one moment that you always remember. You're always going to remember the Rajai Davis home run. And then, the excitement of the Cubs finally winning, 2 teams going at it who hadn't won a World Series in forever. So that was a pretty cool World Series in general and a pretty cool Game 7, So keep that in mind. 2017, we had another one. The Astros beat the Dodgers 5-1 at Dodger Stadium in Game 7. And that was weird. Remember, it was like the Astros scored early. They led 5-0 after 2 innings, and that was it. And it ended up 5-1. It was kind of a boring Game 7. George Springer. Remember George Springer had the great series. He was the MVP in that World Series for Houston. But the Astros World Series Game 7 at Dodger Stadium took the crowd out of it 5-1, and the Astros won their first World Series. So then we go to 2019. Anything happened in that World Series Game 7? Well, the Nationals on the road beat the Astros 6-2, right? So you think it's 6-2, not much going on there. But remember, the Astros led in that game 2-0 after 6 innings. They're thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to win our second in 3 years. They were 9 outs away. And then remember, the Nats scored late. Howie Kendrick had a huge home run. And when it was all said and done, 6-2 the final. But the score doesn't say it, but that was a pretty good Game 7 because it was tight, and then the Nats kind of blew it open at the end. So that was in 2019, and then we didn't get another World Series Game 7 until Saturday night. And, everybody knows what happened, so we don't have to rehash that. But so what do you think? What do you think is since 2008 World Series Game 7s, which was the best one? I mean, I think it would be really hard to top what we just saw. I would give that one the topper. The walk-off in Arizona over the Yankees in 2001. Anytime you got a walk-off hit, that's a pretty big deal. The Giants thing was great because you had Bumgarner. The Cubs, that was an awesome World Series. Remember, the Cubs were down 3-1 in that series, so they had to come back. So thought we'd have some fun with the Game 7, the World Series Game 7 recent history. But there's an interesting note, though. Road teams are now 23-18 in World Series Game 7s. That includes the Dodgers winning in Toronto. 23-18 in World Series Game 7s, the road team. So 41 times in the history of Major League Baseball, we have had a World Series Game 7. 41 times. 41 out of 121 World Series. So we all love a Game 7 in any sport. And we witnessed the best that we've seen in a long, long time on Saturday night. May not like the outcome, but the enjoyment factor was certainly there. So, anyways, that's it. We're not going to talk about Game 7 anymore. We're gonna move on from that. But let's get a few comments in. See if anybody. Let's see. Bake That Dough says the fact that 2016 and 2025 World Series won extra innings is even more dramatic. Yeah, once you put a Game 7 into extra innings, I mean that just ratchets everything up, like big time. So that's a great point. I think, yeah, extra innings is just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Could you imagine if you were a Blue Jay fan or a Dodger fan? So yeah, I think you got to give the extra inning thing has to come into play. So as always, bake that dough with a good point. All right, so we're going to move on to my final segment, and this is, I promise you, this is the last time we're going to talk about the World Series. But I think we do need to finish on a high note. So this interesting narrative out there that. I don't know who started it. I don't get too worked up about it, but if the Dodgers win the World Series, it's going to be bad for baseball. Which I don't even whatever. So, but what do you think about this whole? Okay, Dodgers big payroll, pay all their people, right? They've won now 3 times in the last 6 years. So does that mean that parity doesn't exist in Major League Baseball? Is that what that means? I guess it depends on how you look at it. What I did is I looked back at the different decades, right? With the thought of how many different teams are winning World Series in each decade, and is multiple World Series winners in a decade. Does that mean there is parity in baseball? Or is it more like, well, who's winning? Is there any small market, low revenue, low payroll teams winning? And I think that's interesting. And I think we all kind of know the answer, but I wanted to look back and see like which decade had the most different teams winning the World Series. And does that make you think, well, maybe there's a little bit of parity in Major League Baseball? It's one side of the argument, I think, is basically what I'm saying. But you look back in history, 1936 to 1962, that's a pretty long stretch, right? That's 27 years. The New York Yankees won 16 world championships. Won 16. They were in a bunch more. So that stretch, again, and I know it's a long, long time ago, but it's part of the point I'm trying to make. 1936 to 1962, 27 years. So the Yankees win 16 World Series championships in a 27-year stretch. That's not parity. And this is a long time ago. That's not parity at all. Okay. So what I did is I said, well, let's look here. Let's look at closer to, when we know teams and we know who won and lost. So we don't go too far back. But in the decade of the 80s, okay, we remember the teams in the 80s, right? How many different teams do you think in the decade of the 80s won a World Series? 9. 9 different teams in the 80s won a World Series. That to me is, at least from a who's winning the World Series standpoint, there's some parity there. That's a good thing. In the decade of the 90s, 6 different teams won a World Series. The Yankees won 3. Okay, so that's when the Yankees started to turn it up. But so what I'm saying is, it's not like there's only 2 or 3 teams winning all the World Series in a decade. Decade of the 2000s. Okay, now we're getting closer. Now we remember Giants teams in that. In the decade of the 2000s, 8 different teams won a World Series. That's a lot. right? The Yankees won 2 and the Red Sox won 2. And then there was 6 other ones, 6 other teams that won. I mean, that's a fairly high number, I think. In the decade of the 2010s, when the Giants came into play, there were 7 different teams that won a World Series. Giants won 3, Red Sox won 2. And then more recently, 2020s, we get 6 different seasons. 4 different teams have won, but one of those teams, the Dodgers, and they've won 3 of the last 6. So I guess my point is if there's more teams winning in these decades than maybe I thought. Like I said, in the 2000s, 8, in the decade of the 80s, 9 different teams won a World Series. So does that mean there's parity? Some people will make the argument like, well, yeah, look, I mean, it's not the same teams winning every year, and it's not. But there's still the other side of the equation of where, no, there's not parity because we're not getting any low revenue, lower payroll, small market. We're not getting enough of those teams to the World Series, and not enough are winning the World Series. In fact, it hardly ever happens. And that is true. And I look back, I was thinking, well, when was the last time like a small market or a low revenue, a low payroll team won the World Series? And as I just kind of looked at past World Series winners, I stopped at the 2015 Kansas City Royals, smaller market, right? I mean, not a huge high revenue team. But even the year they won in 2015, their payroll was in the middle of the pack, right? Around 15, 16th out of 30 teams. So they weren't a low payroll team. They were right in the middle. So I kept looking. The Astros in 2017, middle of the road payroll. Even the Cubs in 2016, we just talked about their World Series. Even that, they were a middle of the road payroll. 14th, 15th in the league in size of payroll. So again, I think the argument is always going to be there's not enough of these small market, lower revenue teams making it to the World Series. And that's a fair argument. And if the system doesn't change somehow, and I don't know that it's going to. I mean, you got a major brawl coming up at the end of the 2026 season with the players and the owners. I just don't know how there's going to be some major shift in a CBA agreement that's going to all of a sudden get these lower revenue, smaller market teams to really start, making moves and going to the World Series. I don't know. Is that what you want? I think I've always felt that it's good to have a villain team in sports. So let's talk about baseball. I think it's good to have a villain team, a team that everybody dislikes, as long as that team doesn't win every single year. Okay. And that villain team right now is the Dodgers. It is. Everybody knows it. Is that good for baseball? Yeah, I think having a villain team that everybody else hates except their own fan base, I think that's good for baseball, right? It gets fans out and it gets them ready to go, right? And you think about the Yankees. The Yankees are one of those villain teams, right? The Yankee fans, they like their guys, but nobody else likes the Yankees. Well, the Yankees' last title was in 2009, okay? And they have made 2 trips to the World Series in the last 22 years. That's not a lot. So, where does the parity come in there? Well, you have a huge market team who tries to win every single year, to their credit, but yet it hasn't really showed up. Remember the Yankees won in 2009. What about the Mets? We all know what the Mets do. Spend tons of money, right? And that's fine. That they have it, they spend it, whatever. But their last title was 1986. Think about that. That's 39 years ago. Okay. They've made one trip to the World Series in the last 25 years. We're talking about the Mets. That was in 2015. So Mets are kind of a villain team right now. They spent too much money and, but the success isn't there, right? The Phillies, would you call them a villain team? Maybe. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they spend a lot of money, but again, their last title, 2008. 3 trips in the last 18 years to the World Series. That's not terrible. But these teams are not winning every year, winning every other year, which we're starting to kind of see with the Dodgers. 3 titles in 6 years. The Giants won 3 in 5 years, but they didn't maintain anything after that 5th year. And I'm not saying they should have kept winning World Series titles. That's difficult to do. So I think the Dodger thing is something to keep a close eye on. Do I think it's ruining baseball right now? No, I don't. But I do think it's something to keep a close eye on. If they start rattling off 5 World Series titles in 7 years, you may have, then you may have an issue because they're not going to stop spending, folks. I got news for you. I said it after Game 7 of the World Series, and I'll say it now. If you think the Dodgers will sign another big free agent, at least one this offseason, there's absolutely no question about it. They will sign Kyle Tucker or Bo Bichette or a big name pitcher. They absolutely, positively will sign at least one big free agent. No question. And maybe 2. Because they can. They can. Is that good for baseball? Probably not. But I just don't think this last World Series necessarily was bad for baseball because it was a hell of a World Series to watch. Everybody's talking about it. Maybe you grew some baseball fans. I don't know. But that's been sort of a narrative out there. Did the Dodgers winning ruin baseball? And I just don't think it did. But if it goes on a 5-year roll, then I may have a different opinion on this. So I'm going to get a few more comments in, and then we're going to head out of town. All right, let's see. All right. Bake That Dough says the Braves should have definitely won more than one in the 90s. Yeah. I mean, and I have it somewhere. Let me find it. I have it somewhere. Who won in the 90s? Let me find it. I have this stuff written down, believe it or not. So we're talking about the Braves in the 90s. The Yankees won 3. The Blue Jays won 2. And remember, the 90s only had 9 seasons because of the strike. Yankees won 3. Blue Jays won 2. Cincinnati, Minnesota, Atlanta, and Florida won the other ones. So that was in the 90s. So most people thought the Braves would win a bunch, but they got the 95 one is when they won. Bake That Dough says, will you still be doing some Niners NFL discussion? Yes, I am. And I really wanted to kind of get through the World Series and get through the season and kind of close the door on the baseball season. But we have a lot of Niners to cover yet as the season goes on, as long as they have enough players and they don't lose everybody due to injury. But yes, you know what? I'm going to start back next week, and we'll have an NFL segment and get you all ready for what the Niners are doing. Bake That Dough says, the A's run from 72 to 70, perhaps the most underrated and overlooked in baseball. Yeah, I would say that. It's sort of an Oakland thing. Oakland gets overlooked quite often. And now it's just, there's no baseball in Oakland, which, whatever. But yeah, I think it does a little bit. It was a terrific stretch. Think about it, 3 in a row. That wasn't happening back then a lot. Not at that point. But yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of a forgotten dynasty. And I know there was a documentary made about that. So yeah, I mean, probably in fairness to those guys that that won those 3 in a row. I've met a whole bunch of them, and unfortunately, we're losing some of them. But awesome guys, man. I mean, I worked with Ray Fossey, of course, for 19 years. And to have those guys from those teams come into our booth and be nice to me, I'm a kid compared to these guys, but listening to them talk about those teams, they were very proud, and they still had a little edge to them, and it was always one of my favorite things about working for the A's was seeing and hearing those guys talk about that stretch in the 70s when they won 3 in a row. So yeah, I'm glad we could at least get that out there for the guys. So thanks, Bake That Dough, and thank you for your super chat as well, as always. So one of our good loyal listeners. I'm just trying to get rid of some stuff here, and then we're going to wrap this thing up because I think I've kept you guys up long enough. So as you know, we are brought to you by Tilden Properties, Bay Area-based, family-owned. Tilden Properties has been building investment wealth for their clients since 2008. Call them at 925-209-8558. They specialize in purchasing California's multi-family real estate, and you can be part of it. They're always looking for investors. Also by the Carrick Real Estate Team. I've been telling you about these guys for a long time. Awesome family business. Whether you're moving up, downsizing, or making your first purchase, trust the Carrick Real Estate Team. They've been doing great work since 1978. Contact Mike Carrick today for a free home sale or purchase consultation. Call 925-548-4132. And the Vallone Insurance. Are you tired of being overcharged on your property insurance? Call Vallone Insurance. Save big money on your property insurance by calling Kyle Aron at Vallone Insurance, 925-433-8271. That is it for tonight's show. We tried to cover a little bit of everything tonight. With the baseball season now being over, the book is closed, and we will start kicking around what's going to happen this offseason going into the 2026 season. And I'm going to be back tomorrow night. We're going to do another show tomorrow night. The Glen Kuiper Show will come your way at 8 o'clock. And FP Santangelo is going to be my guest, one of my favorite people, one of my favorite guests, actually. He's a lot of fun to have on as a guest. He's fun. He's smart. He's got great stories, and we always have a good time together. So FP Santangelo will join us, talk about the new manager, talk about the Giants, and we may even kick around what we saw in the postseason. But anyways, FP Santangelo joining me on the Glen Kuiper Show tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. So make sure you join us for that. Hope you enjoy the show, everybody. Hit the subscribe button. Check out my YouTube channel. My producer, Ryan, just continues to kick out videos, and they're all good. So check them out. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow night with FP Santangelo.